Hello, welcome to this presentation about Tomduie Clachan, a proposed zero-carbon, affordable community housing project at Comrie Croft. My name is Andrew Donaldson and I'm the founder here. A little bit of context. Comrie Croft was formed through a community crowdfunder back in 2008 and had set out a goal at that time for community and environmental regeneration. The activities that go on here are some of which are owner managed and some of which are part of the core Comrie Croft Limited business, include accommodation, a venue, camping, a bike shop and bike trails, and 3 food businesses which include Tomduie Market Garden, the Scottish Tea Factory and the Tea Garden at Comrie Croft Cafe. There are now 30 full-time equivalent jobs on Comrie Croft, and we were awarded the Nature Scot Sustainable Business of the Year in 2019. We have had independent assessment of our carbon footprint and have been working hard to become carbon neutral since 2020. That's on, for those that know a little bit about these things, that's on scope 1 and 2, the factors which are within our direct control. Scope 3, we have a plan to reduce those are the things which are like suppliers and our customers' impacts. This graph illustrates gross value added. That is the contribution that Comrie Croft makes to the local economy. The blue line illustrates the direct contribution, the grey line the induced contribution, which includes like knock-on effects of money circulating in the economy. This is mostly through the likes of wages. What this graph doesn't include is the owner-managed businesses such as Tomduie Market Garden. Those figures would be on top of these numbers. So, what's the problem? Well, first of all, the climate and nature emergency. I think we can all see the changes happening around about us at the moment, and with COP26 coming up, the nature of the crisis facing us is becoming more and more apparent. Perhaps locally, there's also a different kind of crisis in terms of housing. Certainly, I know lots of local families and young people especially who are really struggling to remain living in the Comrie area in either rented or owned accommodation. One example of that is that 6 people who live and work at Comrie Croft live in caravans because they have little other option, and housing is definitely a major barrier to other local businesses in recruiting people and to grow their businesses. It's basically unaffordable for many people to stay in the Comrie community and to work on jobs on the land, to grow food and to do things which may not pay a huge amount of money but which are actually vital to all of us. Tomduie Clachan is an exciting opportunity to address some of these challenges and to pioneer a form of housing that really is fit for the 21st century. Here's some of the design principles that we've worked in. First of all, it's zero carbon. That means in the build and in the way that it helps people to live once they're living in it. It's a co-housing scheme, so that means that the houses are a bit smaller than you might expect, but some of the functions that would normally be inside the house are shared on a communal basis. So for instance, the houses won't have washing machines, but they will have access to a communal laundry facility. There'll also be a guest house which enables the rooms to be built without extra guest rooms that are hardly ever used, because there's a guest house there for everybody to share. The Clachan is the flagship in a new educational project for Comrie Croft, which I will detail more in the next slide. And there are 9 homes planned altogether, some of which will be owner occupied, in other words for sale, and some of which will be for rent. The owner occupied houses will be discounted from market value based on a discount on the land that is sold by Comrie Croft, and also we hope by government grants from the Rural Housing Fund. The for rent homes will be set at affordable levels pegged to affordable rents from Perth and Kinross Council. The design is based on a traditional clachan. A clachan, I think, is also called sometimes a fermtune or a township, or maybe in England a hamlet, and it means a cluster of houses in a rural area, usually set around a common resource like a spring or some good ground for growing vegetables. It's really designed to encourage community, like neighbourliness, bumping into people, and cars are kept off-site, and so we're looking for it to encourage walking and cycling as the primary means of travel. Energy for the scheme, it will all be produced on site from renewable sources. The mainstay of that is a micro hydro scheme supplemented by solar panels, and food is already produced on site in good quantities by Tomduie Market Garden. That will be supplemented by new agroforestry plantings and a killyard garden for the Clachan, and a food forest immediately behind it. And the buildings will be built from local materials, natural materials, and therefore we think will really form an attractive and kind of integral part of the landscape. And here's where this site is for it. It's in behind the trees and has good views and things, but also doesn't impact on views from other places. Land, Living and Learning is the name we've given Comrie Croft's new education product. Tomduie is the centrepiece of this plan to grow our positive impact, particularly through experimenting and inspiring the next generation, and getting everybody to think how we can live and look after the planet. The key components of this are the Tomduie Clachan, which I will highlight here, the regenerative farming, which is already led by Tomduie Market Garden here, and various bits of agroforestry which we plan to add to that, and the permaculture trail, which is partly hidden under my picture here, but permaculture is a form of agriculture based on working very closely with natural kind of principles, but also making those as productive as possible for people. The youth programme, Back to the Future, the working title is planned for here. That's really about experiencing all kinds of things like growing your own food, and building in simple natural building techniques that give a taste and hopefully inspiration for the future. And rewilding, finally, the core of that is this area up here, where there will be very little human impact, and there's already a lot of natural regeneration of woodlands going on. The Land, Living and Learning programme will have the following impacts. 12 new full-time equivalent jobs, and these figures come from the economic benefits study which was conducted independently. £350,000 of gross value added, that's the additional contribution to the local economy. New opportunities for community enterprises, and learning opportunities resulting in 15,000 additional annual visitor days, and those are importantly, that's off-peak additional visitors rather than peak days. So we think that will help grow the business without adding to any negative impacts. It will also encourage engagement, that's the whole purpose of the thing, in regeneration and regenerative activities, and should result in significant carbon footprint improvements both at Comrie Croft and through behaviour change elsewhere. And finally, landscape and biodiversity improvements through the different activities that are going on. This slide illustrates one component of Tomduie Clachan and the way that we can use it for education. So this is the wastewater system. So what you would normally think of as sewage, a waste product that has to be taken away in a tanker or put through a village sewage system and to be treated as waste. At Tomduie will actually be an input to useful things like wildlife habitat and to an orchard for fruit and to a pleasant environment for people to look at. So just looking at the process here, wastewater comes from the Clachan and goes through what's called here a vermifilter. Now that is a worm-based system for dealing with the solids in the wastewater. From that, the slightly cleaner wastewater goes into a wetland and then a further wetland, and at each stage of this process it's getting cleaner till finally it's able to be used on basically providing water to fruit trees, and a good example of a system that doesn't produce any waste. So next we've got a few slides showing some of the sources of inspiration for the design of Tomduie. The first one here is Auchendrain near Loch Gilphead. This was the last occupied Clachan in Scotland right into the 1970s, and just as a really nice example of how a Clachan was and the kind of vernacular design. Likewise, this is Gernan black houses on the Isle of Lewis, and it shows very well how the houses are clustered together. Lochside House, a modern example, award-winning architectural example, the kind of style that we are looking to emulate. And a local example from Glentarkin above St Fillan's. Again, a Clachan. There's a few small clusters of houses up there, including west of Glentarkin, Jerusalem and Morel. And finally, Ardgiel. So this is a scheme that was funded through the Rural Housing Fund that we hope to tap into. And having spoken to some of the home owners here, I know that there are really good houses to live in, warm, well-insulated houses, and affordable at the same time. Here we have the architect's impression of what the Tomduie Clachan will actually look like. I will just highlight the common buildings. This is the laundry and plant room building, the common house and guest house, and an outdoor kitchen with the killyard garden attached here. I will continue to show a couple more slides showing what Tomduie will actually look like, but if you want to pause the presentation, you can read all the notes on this slide. So here we have a view looking west along the street. The street, as I said before, isn't designed for cars, it's designed for people. Cars will be able to access, and there will be access for, obviously, for fire engine, should that ever be needed. But there is no parking or garages, and cars are kept off-site. And here we have the opposite view looking along the street from the west looking east, with the common house on the left. We're very fortunate to have had assistance from Mark van Grieken, landscape architects, to assess the impact or the potential impact of Tomduie Clachan on the landscape and on visual amenity. Here is their overall conclusion. They said the proposed development will be visible from only a limited number of locations in the wider area, and where visible it will be seen as set into the existing deciduous woodland framework such that it will not alter the character of the landscape of the surrounding area. The photo in the background here is actually the view from Comrie Croft right next to the site of Tomduie Clachan, looking towards Comrie, and basically the site is not visible from the village or from the roads in the immediate area. And as I've said, the design takes its cue from the traditional form of rural architecture, going quite far back, even pre-modern farming, and it emphasises modest-sized buildings built from local natural materials. So how will it work? So it's, as we've said, it's co-housing with shared facilities such as a guest house social space, a micro hydro power scheme, a shared laundry, an electric car club, and a food forest and killyard garden. There'll be a mix of ownership and houses for rent, and rents will be pegged to local authority affordable levels. Sales will have a thing called a rural burden inserted on the title deed, and that's basically a condition to ensure that the houses remain affordable when they're sold on, and that the community purpose remains at the heart of the Clachan. And the interests of the residents, including common property and the collective build initially, will be looked after by the residents themselves through Tomduie Collective Housing Community Interest Company. And finally, for the slide, there will be an allocation policy for the housing, modelled on the community housing from Neudart's allocation policy, which just is simply to support the community housing aims as we are laying out in this presentation. We are blessed that Tomduie Clachan has had some fantastic support already. It's particularly thankful to the Scottish Rural Housing Fund for helping to fund the feasibility assessment for the project. Tomduie is now also a pilot project within the Scottish Government's Smart Clachans initiative, and that really is looking at how Clachans like Tomduie and 4 others that are pilot projects can look at rural housing that's fit for the 21st century. And finally, Rural Housing Scotland has provided some great support alongside other Perthshire rural co-housing projects. So I'd just like to say thank you so much for watching. I'm not the world's best presenter, so thank you for going with all the ehs and ums and hesitations and so on. Please do email us, post comments on wherever you might be watching this presentation, whether that's on social media or elsewhere. And if you've got any suggestions, support or anything else to say about the project, please do let us know, and we'll love to hear from you. Thank you. Bye bye.